Today on the newscast, we're joined by two top Middle East experts to break down all the latest news out of Israel. Will the new government last? And what will the coming war with Hezbollah look like? Find out coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. I recently returned from 8 great days on the ground in Israel. We were filming there for the Watchman TV show and also the Watchman Newscast. Folks, what a time to be in the land. Number one, Israel was just coming out of that war with Hamas. Number two, a new Israeli government was being sworn in. And number three, Israelis are looking ahead at what they know is the looming coming war, the Great Northern War, against Hezbollah and the Iranian regime in Syria and in Lebanon. So really an historic time to be on the ground in Israel, and a real thrill for me to be in my second home, Jerusalem, and to sit down with my good friends Chris Mitchell, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, host of the Jerusalem Dateline Show, and Joel Rosenberg, best-selling author. His latest is called The Beirut Protocol. He's also the editor-in-chief of All Israel News, a great site that you need to check out. I sat down with Chris and Joel at TBN's Jerusalem studio to break down all of these history-making developments unfolding in Israel and in the region right now. Number one, who is Naftali Bennett, the new Israeli prime minister? Who is Yair Lapid, the new Israeli foreign minister, who will be prime minister in this rotating premiership that he is doing with Bennett as part of this coalition right now? Will this coalition last? We also discussed that Great Northern War. Joel's new book, The Beirut Protocol, which I mentioned, is about the Hezbollah threat to the north, a fictional account, but very, very true to life. And Chris, many times, has reported for CBN News from that Israel-Lebanon border. So take a look. Chris Mitchell, Joel Rosenberg, with the Watchman in Jerusalem. Gentlemen, I really think the story right now, yes, we have madness in Gaza, a serious, serious threat there, as we just saw in May. But the threat to the north, we touched on it before the break. Joel, you just wrote a book about this, the Beirut Protocol. In your research for the book, in the interviews you were doing, fill us in on why Hezbollah is such a serious threat. This, as bad as Hamas is, Hezbollah seems like another level, on a lot of levels, in terms of threats to the Jewish state and beyond.
Yeah, I agree with you. As I did the research for the Beirut Protocol, which is a novel, it's a political thriller, it's not a nonfiction book, but I actually sat with current Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz and senior Israeli intelligence and defense officials. One, to interview them, yes, for All Israel News and for another book I've got coming out, but I was doing double duty. I was trying to learn everything I could, and the thing that became clear is they said in 2006. There were 4,000 missiles fired at Israel in 33 days, okay? 4,000 missiles a month. They said this could be 4,000 missiles a day fired from southern Lebanon at Israel, and they could run that out, for as long as, they've got 150,000 missiles is what they're saying, roughly. So, and then when the Beirut Protocol was about to release, Chris and his team and we went up to the border and interviewed a number of other senior officials, and they basically reiterated everything that I was writing about the novel. The novel is about what if. Yeah. What if the third Lebanon war erupts? And these things erupt unexpectedly. You could be sitting and having a Coca-Cola in Jerusalem or in Des Moines or Philadelphia, and the next thing you know, your phone is blowing up because the region's blowing up because somebody's made a decision. In the novel, I'll just say, I started it similarly to the way it started in 2006, which wasn't a strategic decision. It was a raid, a terror attack on the border that so quickly erupts as both sides feel like they need to show deterrence to the other side. And that's what I fear, is that as bad as that was, what we just went through with Gaza, I think most Americans, most Christians around the world really can't even fathom. I'm not sure I can fathom, and I wrote the novel, how bad a third Lebanon war would really be. Because it's a war with tremendously more devastation than anything we've just seen.
It seems like Iran is forming a ring of fire from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria, Iraq, even Yemen with the Houthis. Chris, you have followed Iran closely. You both have. I'd like to get both of your takes on this. Chris, you've written books about the Iran threat as well. Can you talk about Iran's kind of grand strategy here? The goal seems to be to encircle Israel on all sides with proxies, armed to the teeth with missiles and drones.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things they want to do, first of all, we have to understand their ideology and their theology. Their theology is they really do want to dominate the world. In the meantime, they want to, first of all, have an arc, a land bridge all the way from Tehran to Lebanon, and they want to dominate this region. They want to dominate their Sunni Arab neighbors. That's why Saudi Arabia and the UAE and other of the Gulf states, they see Iran almost as much of an enemy as Israel does. And so that's part of their strategy. And they do have this ring of fire that they want to surround Israel with all their proxy armies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. God forbid when we do see a third Lebanon war, we're going to see the IDF hit Hezbollah like they've never been hit before. And I remember we interviewed an officer up there, you were there, Joel, and he said that the third Lebanon war, they believe, will be the last Lebanon war.
Very interesting. A decisive defeat for Hezbollah. Joel?
Well, yes, but let's just say, why hasn't it happened yet? We did see 9 or 10 missiles come in, but they were shot down
from southern Lebanon
during this recent thing, and everyone wondered, are they going to open up another front? I think the Iranian leadership right now is actually holding this as a reserve. Why? Because it's the number one threat to Israel, to keep Israel from using military strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. And one of the challenges now, right, is if the Biden administration continues down the road of trying to appeal to, possibly even fund, bribe, whatever,
appease
the Iranians, and we'll give you hundreds of billions of dollars. Just don't keep moving forward with your nuclear program. If Israel feels that there's daylight between itself and Biden, if they feel like Iran is dangerously about to build the bomb and Biden won't do anything, then Israel will have to think very seriously about making a strike. And we're much better prepared today, militarily and intelligence, than we were. We have F-35 fighter jets that are stealth. We have tankers now that can refuel. And we have the Saudis giving us air overflight rights, literal. I mean, we know that now.
Game changer, potentially.
Yeah.
But what Israeli planners have to weigh is, if you go and strike Iranian nuclear facilities, you could unleash 150,000 missiles from the north. And that is what I think currently Iran is not seeing it primarily yet as an offensive weapon, but as a check, allowing themselves to build their nuclear plans and development without an Israeli strike. But it is a very dangerous game of three-dimensional chess.
We have a new government here in Israel, though, after 4 elections over a 2-year span. Rotating prime ministership, starting with Naftali Bennett, right wing, Yair Lapid, a centrist. Chris, what are your impressions of this new government? First of all, a lot of evangelicals, Joel, you've made this point. A lot of evangelicals were so used to Bibi, of course. 12 years in succession as prime minister. Now we have new leadership. Can you tell us a bit about this new government and this wide-ranging coalition that's come together?
Yeah. First of all, it's been sort of like the Israeli version of Game of Thrones. I mean, just very chaotic for the last 4 years. Somebody described Israeli politics not like Republican, Democrat, sort of chocolate and vanilla. It's like Baskin 31 flavors. I mean, there's like a number of parties that are in there. It's a very odd coalition, maybe the first time in Israelis history, from the right, from the center, from the left, and an Arab Islamist party called Ra'am. That's the first time this has happened. We had the opportunity to interview Naftali Bennett before the 4th election, and a lot of people, I think, would be surprised to see what he brings to the table. He's religious. Somebody told me the other day, probably the first Israeli leader that's wearing a kippah since temple times. He's been in a special commando unit, a startup entrepreneur, made millions in a startup many years ago. He was the defense minister, the educational minister. So when we interviewed him, he said he was prepared to be prime minister. And the way things have gone after the election, here he is, only 7 seats in the Knesset, and yet he's going to be the first prime minister.
Another first.
That's right.
Never in the history of the modern state of Israel, or certainly no kings in the ancient times, could a party with only 7 out of 120 seats become the prime minister.
Thanks again to our good friends Chris Mitchell and Joel Rosenberg for joining us in Jerusalem. Folks, if you like that segment, you can watch our entire interview tonight on the Watchman TV show. If you love the newscast, you will love our 30-minute weekly TV show on TBN. My interview with Chris and Joel, the full interview from Jerusalem, tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on TBN. Do not miss it. Also airs tomorrow. That's Friday, July 2nd at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you do not live in the United States, don't worry, the clips will be posted to the Watchman News channel here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, by the way, and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. A lot of fun, again, to be back in Jerusalem, my second home. We've got a lot more great content coming up for you in the weeks and months to come on the TV show and right here on the newscast from this Israel trip. It was 8 intensive days of filming. We were in the north, in the south, and in all parts in between in the Holy Land for such a time as this. God Almighty still sits on the throne regardless of the political situation in Israel and America, regardless of what Iran and Hezbollah do. God Almighty is in control, so be encouraged. Until next time, thanks for joining us here on the Watchman Newscast. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.